Welcome to the Womanhood podcast. I'm your host, Shannon, somatic and energetic integration specialist for women, Foundress of Somatic Body and Creatress of the SomaCycle method and the Feminine Harmony program. And I'm here to inspire you to reclaim your rhythms, remember your wisdom, and root into your womanhood. Each week, I'll be discussing topics centered around our womanhood from a multifaceted somatic and energetic viewpoint, weaving together both science with spirituality and masculinity with femininity. We'll be talking cyclical natures and rhythms, intuition, instincts, ancient womb wisdom, and grounded embodiment strategies. Find yourself a cozy space and let's get started. Hello and welcome to episode where we talk about stillness. We're exploring stillness in the body. And I decided to do an episode on this because I have my monthly Womanhood web calls. So once a month, the girls inside the Somatic Body Circle, a free WhatsApp chat, feel free to join, I'll put the link below. Once a month, I invite the girls inside that chat and the girls inside my Feminine Harmony program into a monthly call. And this call for this month was so profound and moving for everyone who joined, including myself. So I decided that I was going to do an episode on the Womanhood podcast based off the mini teach, like the slides that I did, and kind of take a moment in this episode to allow us to explore what stillness is inside our bodies and how it feels. Where are our blocks when it comes to stillness? And not only stillness, but all aspects of it, like a spectrum of stillness. We can start to explore within that stillness, for example, boredom. Boredom was a big one that came up for me. In my childhood to teen years, I didn't like being still and I didn't like being quiet and having nothing to do because then I felt bored. But then there was this conflicting part of me that didn't want to do anything else. And so I used that real life example in the Womanhood web call. And it's so true that I feel like everyone can relate to that. Like there's that feeling of we want to be still, we want to slow down, but we don't know how to. And I did an episode a few weeks back on why you can't relax even when you try. But that was more from the perspective of the nervous system and that need to find regulation within the nervous system. So today we're here to explore stillness, boredom, and specifically the freeze response. Like I'm going to use the word freeze response in terms of like a nervous system lingo, but it's more going to be focused on reframing stillness for ourselves, our introspective, our subjective perspective on stillness, so that we can start to explore it in a more fun way, in a more positive way, and in a way that's actually going to accelerate what we gain from being in the stillness. So we're going to be able to see the value in stillness by the end of this episode. So yeah, we're going to be exploring stillness, boredom, the freeze response, and the fact that stillness isn't actually a sign that something's wrong, but it's an intelligent invitation to from the body. And so we're going to get into that. I don't want to give away too much just yet, but we'll get into why that is. And I feel like that's the beautiful positive reframe that makes stillness so fun when we start to look at it a different way. So let's get into it. So I feel like this time of year, for those of us who are on the southern hemisphere, we're in coming out of winter. We've reached the winter solstice. We've passed that. Now we're kind of coming out of it. And so the theme I had on the Womanhood web call was called the Winter Thaw, because it was like we're thawing out of winter right now for those of us on the southern hemisphere. And this is the perfect divine timing of it, because as the season of winter is coming out, we're also too coming from stillness and emerging out of it. And so we're going to be looking at ways to be comfortable in the stillness, reframe it so that we can actually start to enjoy the stillness and gain more from it and more depth for ourselves, but also how to come out of stillness in a way that makes us feel like, oh my God, I want to go back there again sometime soon when I feel the calling, rather than that jiltedness of going from stillness to go, 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 stillness to go, go, go. You know, that contrasting comparison of stop, sleep, and then the extreme of let's go and run around. Now, for some people, this might be all they know. This might feel good to them because it is all they know. But in my experience, clinical experience, because I used to do myotherapy, remedial massage, people would come in when they were burnt out in some way. They had an injury, their pain body was screaming at them often, because I did myotherapy and remedial massage and was studying chiro. And so people would come to me when they were already broken and they were forced to stop. And so finding that happy medium, that balance of how can we go from stillness into a slower transit back to moving, and then from moving, slower transit back to stillness. How can we find that softness? So we're going to be exploring that a little bit today as well. I just wanted to mention that. And I do think, again, it's divine timing with where we're at in the Southern Hemisphere seasonally right now. So we're very much following nature right now in timing. And so a few reframes that really helped me with stillness is that when we're in stillness, we can often feel like there's this force to do it, like a forced stillness. Like the example I gave you of my clinical practice where people would come in injured and it's like they were forced to stop. There's that forced energy. We can choose to come into stillness rather than being forced, again, by not going so extreme and coming back to a happy medium. Judging and gauging for ourselves when that calling starts to come in before we're forced to stop, slowly transitioning into that stillness before our body tells us we have to stop, you know? And so we can reframe stillness as not a need or a force, but more as a slowness, a softness, and a necessity of safety. And not just safety physically, like a lot of people hear safety and they think physical in the physical world. I mean like emotionally safe, mentally feeling secure, and just energetically as a soul feeling secure in their lifetime. And so we can look at stillness as not something to force, not something that's unsafe, but created as something that is safe and can be really comforting and soft and gentle and useful for us. Another reframe is that when we're in stillness, a lot of people think that it means we're stuck, that we're stagnant. But I do want to challenge you on that and reframe that if that's something you believe, because stillness and stagnation aren't the same in my eyes. When, like they were at one point, like when I was in my 20s, I was very go, 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 very hustle. And I did struggle to relax. I did struggle to sit in stillness. But yoga was the first thing that slowly introduced me to safety and stillness. And also the fact that when we're still, it doesn't mean that we're stuck or that we're not being productive or that nothing's happening, that we're stagnant. When we're still, for example, in Shavasana in yoga, which is that dead corpse position, the ending position that we lay in for a long time at the end, you know, we're physically still, but there's a lot going on internally. And so stillness isn't stagnation. I want to reframe that. Stillness isn't stagnation. It's actually integration. It's the moment where, and you can think about this in nature too, in winter, where there's really harsh seasons of winter, for example, the northern hemisphere up near the North Pole or the South Pole, everything appears still. Everything appears quiet. The lakes and the waters freeze over. The trees and branches shed, some of them are evergreen. But there's stillness, unless there's a blizzard, of course. But for the most part, there's stillness. Everything freezes, literally. But within that, and if you look at it in nature, the water's still moving underneath. There's still movement underneath. That was weird. I don't know what hand gesture that was to make fireworks go off. And for those of you who are listening, I did a hand gesture and the fireworks went off. But anyway, there's still movement under the water. There's still movement within the trees. There's still movement within the air. And, you know, you hear that, like, if you go inwards and think about a time where you've seen on movies or you've experienced a true winter, there's that white noise of snow and wind. There's still movement. It just because everything appears still, and for example, coming back to us, we could be physically still, but there's still a lot going on inside. There's our mind, our mental body, our heart, and our emotions that we can check into. There's our energy body, the subtle shift of ourselves and how we connect to the collective and how we relate to others, as well as define and discern who we are in relation to others. So we can still play with all those metaphysical aspects, even if we're physically still. So that's a really good reframe. Like looking at stillness is not stagnation, but integration. It's still something purposeful and useful. You're not lazy if you're deciding to take a hiatus. You're not lazy if you took a holiday. That's a social conditioning, a cultural and social conditioning. I think it's not that we deserve stillness and a break. I think that it's necessary. And nature even reflects that for us in its seasons. It is necessary to pause, to have stillness. I created that mini guidebook on my website, Permission to Pause, for a reason. We don't even need the permission to pause, but it's a good segue into realizing that, hey, we never needed the permission in the first place. It's actually a necessary. The other thing that I wanted to reframe, because I did mention this with that reframe of stagnation into integration, but the other reframe is that when we're in stillness, it's not about having to be productive. Like, oh, okay, if I'm in stillness, okay, I'm integrating, it's still useful. There's still things that I'm doing in the background. My heart's still beating. I'm feeling my emotions. I'm checking in with my mind and my mental body. I'm sensing into the energetics. Just because we're in stillness and we feel like we're productive, I urge you to consider, like, is there really a need to be productive in that stillness? Or is it more about being present as well? So that's like that next reframe. Stagnation, it's not stagnation. Stillness is integration. And then from there, when we're in there integrating in that stillness, it's not about being productive. It's about being present with ourselves and checking in. And yes, it's going to be useful. We're going to gain clarity or gain a sense of safety, gain whatever it is that our body is screaming for us to gain, a seed of wisdom. But that reframe of it needing to be productive. So I'm a big believer that our words speak volume and frequency as well. Switching it from productivity to presence, coming back to presence. Again, it's less of that forced energy in stillness and more of that creating that sense of safety. So we're not going to be forcing, creating a need for productivity. We're going to be creating safety and presence. That's the other way of looking at stillness, is when you go into stillness, I'm here to create slowness, safety, and presence, not forced productivity and forced, meaning behind it so that I can justify why I'm being still or taking a break right now. And so rather than asking yourself, a little somatic cue shift as well, this is a reframe. Rather than asking yourself in those moments where you feel the calling to be still, to pause, how do I get moving again from it? You can ask yourself, what is my body trying to protect? Right? Because in stillness, it's all too easy to go, yeah, I think I'm done. I'll just move on now. And then we go back to that jarring, extreme of go, go, go. But when we slow down in stillness, we can actually really ask ourselves, like, what is my body trying to protect here? Use that as a filter. Question that. Start to question all the metaphysical aspects. What am I feeling in my heart right now? My emotional body? What are the looping thoughts and the beliefs that keep coming up for me right now that just feel old and outdated that I want to challenge? That's the mental body. What is that other feeling in my body that just, it feels off, it's deeper? Is it to do with desire and direction of what my heart and mind, but also my soul wants, the direction in life? What is my soul's calling? So that's the energetic body. Start to ask these cues in stillness rather than how do I get moving again? So that's another reframe. And again, that's coming back to that need to be productive and to have achieved something rather than just focusing on the safety and presence. So those are all really good reframes that I just wanted to put out there first. It's what I talked about in the Womanhood web call. The other thing I wanted to talk about is that freeze response. I'm not going to go into it too much in terms of nervous system, but most people understand fight and flight these days, that terminology. And fight and flight is a part of the sympathetic nervous system. It's the go, go, go when we think about it that way. It's a part of our nervous system when we're moving, achieving, doing, and being things for the outside world, for the extroversion aspects of us in the world. But when it comes to the introverted aspects of ourselves, that's where we come back down to parasympathetic and rest and digest. The other part that we don't think of when it comes to sympathetic and the fight and flight is freeze. Everyone's heard of fight, flight, freeze, and maybe even fawn, but a lot of people don't go into freeze and fawn as much in terms of feeling that and understanding that for themselves. So the reason I want to bring up freeze a little bit here is because when we're in freeze response, not so much, and I don't want to come into this from the aspect of a trauma response, from a deep-seated trauma. I'm not here to talk about that today, and nor is trauma my specialty. But when we're in a slight freeze response, shall we say, and we notice ourselves freezing, even something as simple as social occasions, or our body tightens and freezes and we don't know how to answer a question that someone's asked us, or we hop up on stage and we freeze, right? Those smaller examples of the freeze response. I'm going to reframe what freeze means as well, because freezing is a response, but it's also a stillness inside of us. And what freeze says to us is that this doesn't feel safe enough yet. So I want to reframe that the freeze response is actually useful as well. The freeze response has a message for us that this does not feel safe enough yet. It doesn't mean that it's not safe, but for us, our immediate response is that this doesn't feel safe enough yet. And I just wanted to bring that in because the stillness, it's bringing in that usefulness, and we don't start to resent stillness, boredom, the pause, the freeze response, because we can understand that it has a purpose. Again, it's not about being productive, but it has a purpose for us. Fight, flight, freeze, and fawn all have purposes for us, and it's our body speaking to us and telling us that something's off. And when we're in that freeze response, that's our body telling us that this doesn't feel safe enough yet. And we need that time to go in and integrate and figure out what it is that's not making us feel safe, which is why I come back to that somatic cue I asked before. Rather than asking, how do I get out of this stillness? How do I get out of this freeze response? How do I get out of this burnout where I'm just sitting on the couch and munging and binging TV? How do I get out of this freeze response? Rather than asking that, it's like, what feels unsafe in my body right now? What is my body trying to process through right now? Working on that sense of safety and asking all those metaphysical aspects of ourself. What's going on here? What's in my heart? What's in my soul? What's in my mind? What is going on here? There is a usefulness to it, an integration. It conserves our energy when we're in a freeze response. It protects us. It can be resourceful because we can gain clarity, wisdom, a new found sense of self. And it creates a distance from overwhelm in the outside world. Again, I feel like the winter season in nature, just as much as the desire for us to slow down, is an innate intelligence. It's necessary. And so if we take those moments to work on the feeling of safety and stillness and creating a deeper relationship to safety in our body, we can deepen our sense of self and how much we know ourselves as well. So I think there's beauty in stillness. I think there's beauty in boredom, as much as that's probably the part of stillness that I struggle with the most and had struggled with the most when I was younger. But it's something I reframe for myself even now when I find myself unsettled, bored, wanting to move. I question it. And I ask myself, is it because I truly do want to move, or am I running from something because I feel unsafe, right? And so there's a usefulness to it. You don't need to justify it to people either. That's a big one. I think that's a big block that stops us from having our own permission to pause. I am going to put that book in the link below, in the caption below, because I feel like the Permission to Pause mini guidebook would go really well with this episode and just kind of like build upon that exploration of stillness for yourself. Another thing I want to talk about within boredom itself is that boredom can be a portal. Boredom, when we're in stillness and we feel bored, we don't know what to do with ourselves, we feel unsettled, and I always get angry when I'm bored. That's like the emotion, the undertone, the current of boredom for me is like, I'm bored, I don't know what to do, but I know I need to be here. So I get angry and conflicted because I'm fighting it, I'm resisting it. But boredom is a portal as well. I've come to find that in boredom, in stillness, when the distractions do quieten after we pass through the boredom, because again, boredom's like a portal. When we pass through that boredom and finally find that winter quiet, that's why it's always useful to imagine yourself in a winter forest. When everything slows down, not stops, because it's not about being stagnant, but everything slows down and we come into that peaceful part of stillness. You know, we do have to move through the boredom. We do have to move through the fidgetness, like the desire to move and be fidgeting. But when we move through that boredom and that restlessness, that portal, comes true stillness. And within that, we often meet the things that we have been resisting, the things we have been protecting ourselves from, the things that feel unsafe. And so within stillness, we have this freeze response, we have this feeling that something's unsafe. And then when we go to be still, we feel like we're getting closer to that feeling of unsafety. And it's because we actually are. We need to push through the resistance, push through the boredom and the restlessness to come into stillness. And what we often meet within that stillness is the very things we've been feeling unsafe around and feeling scared of or fearful of. Often grief. Meeting grief can be really hard. That's a hard emotion. Admitting you feel lonely or longing for something that you just haven't been wanting to admit to yourself that you're longing for. You know, our deepest desires sometimes can be shameful. We could have like an intuitive insight that is really trying to come through, but we have an old belief or an old fear that's like blocking us from that. But sometimes some really beautiful things can come through once we go through those fears and those beliefs. Again, pushing through them, pushing through the resistance, we can have beautiful seeds of wisdom and intuition. Like I said, we can have beautiful ideas and creativity come through. Visualization practices is an example of being in stillness and inviting creativity in. And we can also within that have truth, and truth can be harsh, but it can also be very, very like beneficial because it's how we gain clarity and a deeper sense of knowing ourselves. And so yeah, perhaps boredom isn't asking us to escape. Perhaps it's asking us to listen. It's asking us to fight through the resistance and come into true stillness and meet the areas that feel unsafe. So I feel like that's probably the number one reason people avoid stillness, and it's become a cultural and social thing to have to justify why we take a break, why we create stillness. To have to justify the slowing down is because it's easier to keep going than to be brave enough to face our internal fears and the deeper emotions that come with that we need to work through in order to gain the wisdom, the clarity, the growth and expansion that comes afterwards. So winter and stillness and pause is all very beautiful. And even when you think about winter in nature, again, it's a necessity. It's not a want, it's a necessity. There's also the other aspect that I'm going to talk about now, which I mentioned earlier, is now that we've reframed what stillness is and that it's a beautiful thing, we can start to come out of it. But how do we come out of it in a way that's not jarring? So we don't go from like, being the classic example I can think of is like we're asleep and then we're wide awake and then we just get up and jump out of bed. There's got to be a bit of a slowness to it. And like, it's funny because as I'm saying this, I'm thinking about my 20s when I was like, go, go, go. And it actually was that extreme. I was such an early riser that regardless of what time I went to bed, whether it was 9 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock, because sometimes I'd stay up studying for exams for Cairo, and I'd get up at 5 every day. I'd just be like buzzing. It's my cortisol spiking because I'm in go, go, go constantly. Let's go. And that's that extreme example of going from stillness and the unconscious state of sleep, but also when we do unconscious practices and choose to go into them, like meditation, yoga, things like that, somatic practices, coming out of it a lot slower is far less jarring, and it creates a trust system with how we relate to stillness. It creates a nicer experience of stillness so that we want to go back there again because we enjoyed it. It wasn't jarring to move in and out of it, if that makes sense. So I do want to touch on that, the transition in and out of slowness. So in terms of getting out of it, because we can apply the principles and tools and approaches of coming out of stillness into movement and basically just reverse it and use it to come into stillness as well. So when we're coming out of stillness, and I think the reason I wanted to start there as well is also because we're literally coming out of winter in the Southern Hemisphere right now too. So as we are literally coming out of stillness right now, we got to think about the seasons. Spring does not rush winter to finish, and winter doesn't feel hurried by spring. So if we follow those natural rhythms, especially as women, if we follow those natural rhythms of the seasons and use those as examples, we can slowly come out of it through feeling and sensing. And the reason I say that is when we think of the chakra system within our bodies, those energy centers, the root chakra, we could say, is probably the most useful for stillness. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the 7 main chakras, I have a webinar that goes through the whole chakra system itself, not just the 7 main. It goes through the 12 majors, the minors, the nadis, everything. But when we look at the 7 main chakras, we have the root chakra, which is our base. It's red. Then we have our sacral, orange. That's the next one up in the body, around the pelvis. So roots at the base of our spine, our coccyx. And then in our pelvis is our sacral chakra, between our belly button and pelvis. And then above the belly button is our solar plexus, the yellow. And then our heart, green at the chest. Our throat, blue, light blue usually. Our third eye, indigo or dark blue. And our crown, sometimes ultraviolet purple, but often white, perceived as white as well. And so those are our 7 mains, just as a refresher. But when we think about stillness and how it works in our body energetically and physically, we have our root chakra. We can sit in stillness, literally with our sit bones, with our coccyx. Tap into that root chakra, which the root chakra represents grounding and safety. And how we can slowly start to come out of that stillness, if we think about it from a chakra system, is by slowly moving up the chakras. And so as we're coming out of stillness, we come into our spring from winter by moving up into the sacral chakra. And so that's really the next step, if we think about it that way. And so that's why feeling and sensing is a big part of coming out of stillness and coming out of that pause, coming out of that break that we took. When we start to feel and sense in the body, and you can think about, for those of you who've done yoga, this is actually how the yoga instructors will guide you out of shavasana. Slowly start to wiggle the hands and toes. Even when I do meditative or guided audio journeys, I do the same thing. Slowly start to come back to your senses in the space. That's moving up from the root chakra, up into the sacral chakra. We start to work with flow and emotion and pleasure and movement and creativity here. We can do reflective practices of what we came to find in that stillness. Some people like to journal, some people like to do a creative art expression of everything they felt and experienced, a felt sense. And that's also really nice because when we go into felt and sensed, it allows us to stay in our body and stay in the lower chakras rather than going right up to the mental body. So if we're coming straight back into journaling, for some of us who are really mind dominant and like mental body dominant, it's easy for us to journal, but it also can sometimes avoid that skipping of going through in order the chakra systems, and we jump straight to the third eye and straight to the crown and start to intellectualize everything. And so that's why I would urge, if you are more mental body dominant like I am, coming out of stillness, I wouldn't do the journaling right away. Doesn't mean don't do it, but I wouldn't do it right away. I would start to come back through the senses and the body, and then just work your way up the chakras from there. And then again, like I said, you can reverse engineer this for coming into stillness. When you notice that your mind is overthinking, is confused, it feels lost, it's like doesn't know what's going on, and you just feel like you need a break, or if your physical body's breaking down and you feel that calling to go down into your root chakra and really ground down into your body because your body's screaming at you, for example, that's where we can start to work top down. And you do that in somatic practices too. That top down practice is down regulating. And so with the chakras, it's like going from crown down to third eye, down to throat, etc., all the way down to root. Work your way down there. There's that slowness. So that's how we can go into stillness as well. And then back up again when we feel ready to come out, rather than jarringly going from third eye and mental body dominant into root chakra and grounded, which the classic example we can all relate to is like go, 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 not listening to our pain body, ignoring our intuition and what's coming through, keep going, and then crash and burn. I did a webinar on this as well, level 0. And so when we're at level 0, it doesn't have to be a jarring experience of going from one extreme to the other. It can be slow, and we can look at it through the chakra system. I feel is a really beautiful way for us all to relate to that nice, smooth transition in and out. So it's not, jarring. So it's not a bad experience. So we don't relate to stillness like it's a bad experience. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I know I kind of jumped around a little bit, but I feel like I really tied it all together. The last thing I'll do, which I often do with my solo episodes, is bring in some somatic cues. I've got 2 somatic questions prepared for you here. And as I ask them and we start finishing up and finalizing this episode, I do recommend or invite you to come to a stillness now. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to worry about, oh, am I going to force this? Am I going to do it wrong? Just drop the expectations. Just meet yourself there. And don't worry if you catch your monkey mind looping as I ask these questions, but just invite yourself to close down the eyes, soften the eyes if you don't want to close them. Drop into the body, drop the awareness down into that root chakra, or slowly make your way down if you feel like you're really heightened right now. Just slowly do a body scan down. And as you're dropping your awareness down, using the breath down and directing it downwards on the exhales, start to notice how your body responds and how you feel in your body as I ask these 2 questions. And just notice what lands. So I'm going to give it time and space in between the 2 questions as well. But just notice what lands in the body as I ask question 1. What season does your body honestly feel like it's in right now? What season, era, phase of life, insert whatever word you want to there, does your body feel like it's in right now? Just noticing how that lands. And then number 2, what has your body been asking for that your mind keeps resisting? What has your body been asking for that your mind or your heart keeps resisting? Allow that to settle into the body, to land into the body. Feel how that question lands in you. Nothing to do, nothing to fix here, just witnessing. And taking note of all the sensations that came through as you listen to those 2 cues, and then slowly making your way back up. Maybe on the in-breaths, you start to bring your awareness up in the body, back up to the mind, the heart, the crown. And you can start to invite your eyes to open back up when you're ready. No rush. It can be a slow transition like we talked about. And I truly hope you enjoyed this episode. I'm actually going to be doing an episode on the audio journey I did on the Womanhood web call. So you're actually going to get a taste of, based on this episode and the next one, the audio journey I do, what a Womanhood web call is like. And if you really do enjoy this episode and the audio journey, that's essentially what the Womanhood web call was. Plus, it was just a lot of raw sharing and feeling and real beautiful vulnerability and support within womanhood that we all shared as women on the call. So if you really enjoy this episode and the next one, the audio journey that comes out that's attached to it, and you feel like you want that unity within womanhood, the Womanhood web call is very specifically called web call because it webs us together, then you can join the Somatic Body Circle on WhatsApp and you'll get the invite every single month if you want to join that. But I'll see you next time for the audio journey, the winter thaw, like coming out of that winter thaw and exploring stillness for ourselves in that way as well. See you then. As we finish this week's episode, remember that you are your own rhythm keeper. So just keep listening for that rhythm and keep coming home to you. Until next time, with love, Shannon at Somatic Body.